Burkina Faso is undergoing an unprecedented transformation under the bold leadership of Captain Ibrahim Traoré, who assumed office in late 2022 with a clear vision and unwavering determination. He is driving a wave of groundbreaking mega projects that are reshaping the nation's infrastructure, revitalizing the economy, and strengthening national defense, from healthcare and agriculture to cultural heritage restoration, education, and youth empowerment. These initiatives are propelling Burkina Faso towards a future of growth, resilience, and stability.
What if the key to ending poverty in Africa was not foreign aid, but simply refusing to import what could be made at home? This is not a theory anymore. It's a reality unfolding right now in Burkina Faso. In the heart of West Africa, President Ibrahim Traoré has declared a war, not with guns, not with foreign enemies, but with a broken economic system that for decades forced one of the world's poorest countries to depend on everything from rice to soap to come from abroad. Today that system is being dismantled, brick by brick, seed by seed. Under Traoré's leadership, a silent revolution is underway, and it doesn't look like the revolutions of the past. There are no red banners or protests in the street. Instead, there are sewing machines humming in community centers. There are looms weaving cotton harvested a few kilometers away. There are cassava factories opening in villages where children used to walk miles just to get processed flour. Burkina Faso is building an economy from scratch, and they're doing it with their own hands. For decades, Burkina Faso has relied on cheap imports from Asia and Europe. Chickens from Brazil, rice from Thailand, tomato paste from Italy. Ironically, in a country where nearly 80% of the population is involved in agriculture, most of the food consumed wasn't even grown or processed locally. This wasn't just inefficient, it was devastating. Farmers couldn't compete with cheap, imported food that often arrived heavily subsidized by foreign governments. Youth couldn't find jobs because factories didn't exist. Women couldn't launch small businesses because even basic materials like soap and shea butter were being imported rather than processed locally. Traoré, a young revolutionary soldier-turned-leader, looked at this dependency and saw it as a form of economic slavery. And so, with quiet conviction and military discipline, he started flipping the system. In 2023, his administration launched a local industry acceleration initiative which focused on 3 goals. Produce locally. From soap to fertilizer, Burkina Faso must begin making what it needs. Train the youth. Young people must be given the skills, tools, and support to become producers. Decentralize growth. Each region should specialize in what it does best and feed into a larger national system. This wasn't just a plan, it was a movement. And the first battle began in an unlikely place, a small factory producing cassava flour in the village of Ziniari. Ziniari is not a place that shows up on international maps. But in late 2023, it became the first domino in a much larger story. Traoré's government, working with a coalition of young engineers and rural cooperatives, built a cassava processing plant in less than 6 months. The factory employed 50 locals, many of them women, and bought cassava directly from over 200 farmers in the surrounding villages. Before the factory, farmers sold raw cassava at exploitative prices. Much of it rotted before it reached distant buyers. Now, the plant processes 5 tons of cassava daily, turning it into flour, starch, and even biodegradable packaging materials. Imports of cassava flour? Down by 70% in just 9 months. But that wasn't the headline. The real story was what sparked it. Word spread. Dozens of local cooperatives began organizing. Village chiefs offered land for small-scale factories. Youths trained in mechanics began repairing broken machines abandoned for years. And suddenly, an entire rural region was buzzing, not with slogans, but with production. Next came cotton. For years, Burkina Faso had exported raw cotton only to buy it back in the form of expensive textiles. Not anymore. In the city of Ouagadougou, Traoré's administration revived an abandoned textile mill and brought in trainers from Ethiopia to teach weaving and dyeing using traditional Burkinabe techniques. Hundreds of young people, especially women, were trained in just 6 months. Today, Ouagadougou-made fabric is sold in markets that used to be flooded with second-hand European clothing. Burkina Faso didn't just save money, it reclaimed dignity. Critics once scoffed at Traoré's vision, calling it naive or nostalgic. But the numbers are proving otherwise. According to the Ministry of Commerce, Burkina Faso has reduced its food import bill by over 30% in 2 years. Locally made soap now accounts for over 60% of the market. Agricultural employment has grown by 12% due to processing expansion. Youth cooperative enrollment has doubled since 2023, and this is just the beginning. But Traoré's approach isn't just about factories and numbers, it's about restoring something deeper, self-worth. He often says in his speeches, "When a people can no longer feed itself, dress itself, or build its homes, it has surrendered its sovereignty. We are taking that sovereignty back, not with guns but with hammers, seeds, and sweat." And yet this bold journey hasn't come without pushback. International players, especially within ECOWAS and certain multinational corporations, are watching nervously. Replacing imports is not just an economic act, it's a geopolitical statement, one that could ripple across West Africa. Because if Burkina Faso can succeed, what's stopping Mali, or Niger, or Senegal? And that question has made more than a few people very uncomfortable.
You will hear about the African Union. Yes, it exists. But what is the effect of the African Union in reality? We cannot talk about integration in the theme and not talk about the African Union. Because it is this organization that should unite us, create real integration. But we regret to see these wars that persist on the African continent, killing millions of young people. And that this organization, which has heads of state, with armies, is unable to organize itself to support certain countries.
Burkina Faso is building, but not everyone is cheering. In fact, some of the loudest noise isn't coming from within, but from outside. Behind closed doors in boardrooms in Abuja, Brussels, and Washington, the mood is not celebratory. It's tense, nervous, even hostile. Why? Because Ibrahim Traoré's war on poverty is beginning to do the unthinkable, threaten entrenched global systems of control, and now, pressure is mounting. The world has grown used to Africa in a particular role: raw supplier of goods, perpetual buyer of finished products. Cotton leaves Burkina Faso, gets processed in India, then returns as finished shirts. Gold is mined, exported to Switzerland, and then resold at a markup. Even food, grown in African soil, is sent to Europe for packaging and sold back to the same farmers who harvested it. This cycle is not accidental. It's the result of carefully structured global trade systems designed over decades, rooted in colonial legacies and corporate greed. Now, with Traoré's local production movement taking root, the system is showing cracks. In just 18 months, Burkina Faso reduced its demand for imported flour, textile, poultry, and processed foods. That alone cut millions in export revenue for foreign producers. And with more youth learning to build and repair local machinery, the demand for imported tools and equipment is also beginning to shrink. To global suppliers who saw West Africa as a guaranteed market, this is economic sabotage. And to regional power blocs like ECOWAS, which have increasingly aligned themselves with Western trade frameworks, Traoré's defiance looks like rebellion. Tensions between Burkina Faso and ECOWAS had been simmering since the military transition in 2022, but Traoré's move toward total economic independence seems to have accelerated the fallout. In 2024, when Burkina Faso refused to abide by certain ECOWAS trade protocols and import quotas, threats of sanctions were quietly raised behind the scenes. Some West African nations, heavily influenced by international lending agencies, began signaling concern over Burkina Faso's rejection of economic cooperation norms. But Traoré didn't blink. Instead, he doubled down, forming new trade pacts with Mali and Niger focused solely on local production and intra-African exchange. Cassava flour from Burkina now goes to Mali. Niger sends livestock feed in return. Together, they're building a mini economic bloc centered not around import-export cycles dictated by France or the EU, but by African needs and capacities. It's a bold vision, and it's deeply threatening to the status quo. International corporations, especially in the food, textile, and agriculture sectors, have also taken notice. Multinational brands who once dominated Burkina Faso's market are seeing their market share eaten up by new local startups. The most public example came in early 2025, when a French-owned food distributor saw its rice contracts canceled in favor of local cooperatives producing organic brown rice in the Kuka region. The company issued a veiled statement about unfair trade practices and government favoritism, but locals saw the truth. They were losing control. But the pushback didn't stop at statements. Reports have quietly emerged of local businesses receiving sudden legal threats from corporate lawyers. Investigations have been launched into newly formed youth cooperatives. In some cases, vital raw materials for production, like packaging supplies or spare machine parts, were mysteriously delayed or blocked at customs. Insiders believe these are attempts to slow down or frustrate the progress of the local production wave. Not everyone within Burkina Faso is on board either. Some urban elites who benefited for years from import monopolies and foreign contracts now feel pushed aside. In Ouagadougou and Bobo Dioulasso, merchants complain that the rush toward local production is destabilizing and too rapid. One textile importer who once brought in cheap clothing from China told a local paper, "This new system is killing our businesses. We've built relationships over years. Now we're being told to buy expensive local fabric just to be patriotic?" It's a real tension. Local goods, while more sustainable and dignifying, often cost more initially due to limited infrastructure and economies of scale. And for struggling families, this creates a short-term dilemma. Support the national vision or stretch your francs to the cheapest option available. Traoré's government is trying to walk a fine line, subsidizing local goods to stay competitive while scaling up infrastructure to eventually bring prices down. But that takes time. And in politics, time is a dangerous luxury. Behind the scenes, something else is happening. As international pressure grows, Traoré is quietly building new alliances that could reshape Africa's economic map. In late 2024, Burkina Faso signed a secret trilateral production deal with Guinea and Mali. The agreement, known internally as the Cancan Compact, includes joint ownership of processing facilities, shared rail infrastructure, and cross-border industrial zones. And this is only the beginning. Talks have reportedly begun with countries like Chad and even the Democratic Republic of Congo, nations frustrated with being resource-rich but manufacturing poor. This signals something far larger than Burkina Faso's fight. It's the beginning of a continental rethink. One diplomat close to the matter summed it up.
Traoré isn't just building factories, he's building a new story for Africa, and that terrifies the old world.
Ladies and gentlemen, Pan-Africanists, in just 1 month, Captain Ibrahim Traoré has proven once again why he is the leader Burkina Faso needs in these transformative times. With vision, determination, and an unwavering commitment to progress, he has delivered 3 monumental achievements that will reshape the nation's future. This is not just leadership. This is revolutionary change in action.
Building from the ground up, youth cooperatives, women-led factories, and indigenous innovation. Burkina Faso's revolution isn't being led from the capital alone. It's unfolding in dusty villages, on farm plots, in modest workshops powered by generators, and most of all, in the hands of ordinary citizens. If the first act of Traoré's war on poverty was breaking dependency and confronting foreign powers, the second is about building something permanent, something deeply rooted, and it begins not with policy, but with people. In this chapter, we go beyond the headlines to meet the real architects of this revolution, the mothers, mechanics, dreamers, and youth collectives rewriting the story of production in Africa. In the dry plains of Dédougou, where joblessness once drained entire towns of their young population, a quiet miracle is unfolding. Here, a youth-led cooperative called Tegawenda Industries was born in a refurbished chicken hatchery. With a small grant from a government development fund and the support of retired engineers volunteering their skills, the group began manufacturing farm tools, hoes, planters, irrigation kits, using mostly scrap metal and local materials. Within 9 months, they were supplying 12 nearby villages. By the second year, they had hired 40 full-time workers under 30 years old. One of the founders, 26-year-old Aruna Zongo, summed up their mission with pride.
They told us to wait for jobs, we decided to create them.
Across Burkina Faso, over 600 youth cooperatives like Tegawende have emerged in just 2 years. Some focus on agriculture, others on machine repair, mobile phone maintenance, construction materials, or even solar panel installation. What unites them all is a simple belief: Burkina Faso belongs to those who build it. In the city of Fada Ngourma, we meet another kind of warrior, women who turned a dying soap-making tradition into a booming industry. Under a collective called Benkadi, nearly 200 women, many widows or single mothers, now operate a shea butter and soap factory. It began with 5 buckets, a few molds, and stubborn faith. Today, their shea products are sold in 6 regions across Burkina Faso. and they've begun exporting to Togo and Benin.
For years we begged for help, now we are the help.
What's remarkable is not just the economic success, but how these women are reinvesting in their communities. Benkadi donates 10% of its profits to build girls' classrooms and offers free vocational training to any woman who wants to learn. This isn't trickle-down economics, it's bottom-up empowerment. While factories and cooperatives get much of the attention, a subtler transformation is happening at the intersection of tradition and innovation. In the hills of Banfora, traditional healers and young agronomists have joined forces to create organic fertilizer and herbal remedies using ancient recipes and modern processing techniques. Their products are not only eco-friendly but now certified for national use, replacing expensive chemical imports. Another example, in the Sahel region, engineers are working with local craftsmen to build mud-based cooling units for food preservation, essentially solar-powered fridges made from earth with zero electricity needed. These are helping remote farmers extend the shelf life of tomatoes and peppers, dramatically reducing waste and increasing profits. It's innovation, yes, but it's also restoration. Traoré's government calls it sovereignty through culture. Burkina Faso's local production revolution is not only changing how people work, it's changing how they learn. In 2024, the Ministry of Education restructured hundreds of secondary schools into productive learning centers. Instead of just theoretical classes, students now spend part of their day working in fields, repairing tools, sewing clothes, or managing cooperative shops. These are not token activities. They're linked directly to national production goals. A school in Wahiguya now supplies uniforms to government workers. A tech academy in Gawa designs low-cost software for farm accounting. Students graduate not just with certificates, but with skills that serve both them and their country. For decades, the West portrayed African poverty as a problem to be solved with aid. Traoré's movement flips that narrative entirely. Here, dignity is not found in donations, but in the act of producing value from within. Instead of giving rice, Burkina Faso grows it. Instead of importing clothes, it sews them. Instead of begging for jobs, it creates its own industries, small, steady, and sovereign. This is a war on poverty, yes, but it's also a spiritual awakening. And yet, while the momentum is real, the journey is far from over. Can a small landlocked country, once dismissed as poor, unstable, and insignificant, really shift the direction of an entire continent? Burkina Faso is not the first African nation to dream of self-sufficiency, but under President Ibrahim Traoré, it may be the first in a generation to truly act on it, boldly, consistently, and without waiting for permission. Now the world is watching, and so are Africa's neighbors. Because something is happening that goes beyond cassava mills, soap factories, and cotton workshops. It's something deeper, the return of belief. Belief that Africa can rise, not as a beggar, but as a builder. So what's next? And can this local production model scale beyond Burkina Faso? In early 2025, a confidential report by the African Union leaked to regional media. It described Burkina Faso's strategy as a viable model for continental adaptation and recommended that member states explore similar approaches to local manufacturing and trade. Since then, at least 4 countries, Mali, Niger, Guinea, and Chad, have initiated consultations with Burkina Faso's Ministry of Economic Planning to study their cooperatives, educational reforms, and production hubs. Each of these countries, like Burkina Faso, has faced sanctions, debt traps, and foreign pressure. But they also share something else: abundant youth, fertile land, rich culture, and a hunger for transformation.
If Burkina can do this with limited resources, said a policy advisor in Guinea, what's stopping us?
It's a question more African nations are starting to ask. One of the most striking results of Traoré's war on poverty has been the geopolitical realignment it triggered. In 2023, Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger formed the Alliance of Sahel States, initially as a defensive posture against ECOWAS sanctions. But that alliance has since evolved into something far more ambitious: a shared economic and industrial pact aimed at severing dependency on Western imports and loans. Together, they've launched a joint agricultural development fund focused on cross-border irrigation, shared textile production zones utilizing each country's local cotton, a collaborative research program on renewable energy manufacturing. Share your thoughts in the comments below and don't forget to like and subscribe now.